Welcome to Anticipating Christ's Return YouTube channel, a place where we can gather together and joyfully anticipate the return of our Lord. I hope you enjoy. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Caitlin. I know I went live, but I do want to do a bit of a more organized thought for you about the new first presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I want to begin with President Oak's message, and I have the transcript pulled up, and I want to read what he said and discuss. I will go through his message, a little bit of his message, not the full thing. I'm sure we've all watched it, so I don't need to replay it, or I don't need to whatever, but I want to talk about what he said, some of the things, and then I want to talk about what President Eyring said. There were some interesting things that were shared that are of, I didn't, when I did the live, I didn't have the direct quote. So here we go. He says, we will strive in all respects to press forward this great work. Most recently, we have been led by a magnificent prophet of the Lord, President Russell M. Nelson. And that I know a lot of us have a testimony of, if not all of us have a testimony of. He says, we have much work to do to fulfill the challenges he has given us, and there is more yet to come. And then he says, which I testify in all humility. The thing I loved about President Nelson is that, yes, he did always leave us with a challenge to become. And that is actually something that President Oakes has also done. President Oakes is not content with us just hearing the words. He wants us to become what God wants us to become. And I think that is something that both President Nelson and President Oakes have both emphasized, is this need to become. So when he said there is still much work to do to fulfill the challenges that he has given us, some of the challenges that he has given us, right off the top of my head, without going and finding a list and sharing a list with you, challenges to be peacemakers comes to my mind. Challenges to prepare ourselves and the world for the second coming. The challenge to gather scattered Israel comes to mind. The challenge to make an appointment with the Lord in his holy house and then keep that appointment. So there are, and I know that there are plenty more of challenges that have been given, but I just love that he says, and there is more to come. That mimics what President Nelson said towards the beginning of his presidency. Take your vitamin pills, get your rest, there's more to come. And yet that's what President Oakes is saying too. You can tell that he is receiving revelation for the church from God. So yeah, there is more yet to come, of which I testify in all humility. The Lord speaks through his servants. There is much to be done, for our ministry is a ministry of all the children of God on the face of the earth. We pray for all, and we seek to serve all. Oh, I love it. This is a great reminder. I've mentioned this in a few videos that I've recorded. I just got an email. New church announcement. This is something that I've emphasized a lot lately, that the prophet of God is the prophet for the whole world. And that is something that was emphasized several times in this press conference, if you will, if this announcement of the first presidency, that the prophets and apostles and the church, but really the prophets and apostles are for the whole world. That's always been the case, regardless of if people accept them as prophets, that's a different thing. But God has always called prophets and apostles to speak for the Lord. So when they all testified that President Holland did the same thing, I think they all kind of did. They all testified that this is the work of the Lord and that they are prophets. President Oaks is now the prophet for the world. That is just, it's a little mind-boggling a little bit. You read the scriptures and you think, yeah, I know. But unless you, like, I've been in the church my whole life. And so for me, I know that we have prophets and apostles. That it might seem redundant that I am emphasizing this so much. But to the world, a world who, hopefully people still hold on to the Bible. It's always interesting to me to hear convert stories of people who were, they didn't have the gospel, or they were, a Christian or a Catholic or whatever. And as they read the scriptures, they read, oh, prophets? Well, why don't we have prophets today? And the answer is a resounding, we do. We do have prophets today. And it is our duty as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to testify of these prophets, seers, and revelators. To let the world know. And there are many people who are testifying. Now, if you don't feel confident testifying, then share their messages or share the messages of those who are testifying. Because the world needs to know. It's actually really interesting to me, and I don't want this to go long, but it seems like messages against the church spread far and wide. Because it feels like that community just shares and blasts. And it probably has to do with the fact that, Satan will seem to have power up until he doesn't. And Christ comes and takes his position as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But it's always interesting to me because I'm like, can't we spread the gospel message far and wide? Can't we make things go viral because we share them so much? What if we all shared President Oaks' message? It'd go viral. The world would have no other choice than to listen to that, to a prophet of God. And so as we listen to what he's saying, there is much to be done because our ministry is a ministry for all of the children of God on the face of the earth. We have a part to play in that fulfillment of this work, this great work that is true and that we testify of. Oh, so exciting. Okay, it's so exciting. I loved what President Christopherson said quickly. He said, I am deeply honored. And then he says, but I recognize that I am not called to be honored, but I am called to serve. These men, these prophets and apostles, don't do it for respect, for position. They don't do it for the honor, because there's not. you think about it. Anyone who is so bold to share their religious views that aren't popular, you can't do it for the honor, because really, as much honor as they might get, or I might get, or whoever might get, they receive an equal amount of dishonor. They receive an equal amount of hatred, criticism, stone throwing, Not literally. Like, when was the last time you picked up a... But you see what I mean? That when these prophets today are stoned, it is with words. It is with mean comments. Prophets aren't popular, and prophets still are rejected. Now, you might disagree with me. Someone actually disagreed with me. They're like, no, prophets aren't rejected. Are you kidding me? Maybe not as much within the church, but absolutely without the church. But there is still a rejection of prophets within the church, And sure, there are people outside of the church who revere and look up to prophets. There are people outside of the church who do recognize the good that they do. But majority of the people don't. Okay. President Eyring, he said, he was cute too. He's like, I was equally as surprised, which I was like, no, you weren't. I mean, he has been in the first presidency for since 2007, when Elder Faust, President Faust died, and I think that is, that's 18 years that he has been in a first presidency. Before that, I think he was in the, I'd have to look. I think he was in the, okay. He was in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles for 12 years. So he got called in 1995. So he was in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles for 12 years, and he's been in the first presidency for 18 years. So anyway, my husband and I, we were having that conversation today just because we don't remember a time. I remember when President Faust died, but I was still pretty young when that happened. I remember my mom was so sad. But yeah, that's all I remember, Okay, so he says, I was equally surprised, and he talked about trust a lot. He's like, I'm grateful for the trust that has been given. This was really interesting, though. He said, he testifies of President Oaks, and how President Oaks is the prophet of God. And he says, I have seen the power of God come upon him. And it's been a reassuring thing for me to know that just as in the days of old, when Peter and others would lead the church, that people would be able to recognize that that was the Lord's servant to lead his church. And I think that that's really interesting that, again, he points to ancient prophets. He points to Peter and says, just as Peter led the church after Christ died, yeah, same thing. We can recognize that God's power rests on the prophet. A lot of people, President Holland, he shared that the mantle of this calling has rested upon him, and that it will continue to rest upon him. And then he says that he will receive a fullness of that mantle. And I think that is a really cool thing to watch for and anticipate of this mantle. That, yes, he is a prophet of God, but as he perfects, it's so interesting, right? Today is his first day as being a prophet of God. It's interesting. I always tell my kids, this is my first time being a mom. I don't know what I'm doing as a mom. This is my first time I've raised a 7-year-old. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just learning every day as I go. And I'm hoping that Jesus Christ will help me in this. And I think that's something that we need to realize and give grace for the prophets and apostles and really our bishops, our stake presidents, our leaders. We need to recognize that this is their first time living as well. This is their first time. This is his first day being prophet of God. That mantle rests upon him. Well, I'm recording this on the 14th, October 14th. Before today, he was not the prophet of God. Now I know that we say prophets, seers, and revelators. We sustain them. But when we sustain them, now think, they had to have a special, they had to go through this motion. All had to agree. Now, I've seen a lot of people say, he's the prophet. Of course he's the prophet. He's always been the prophet since President Nelson died. Well, he actually hasn't, really. They all set him apart as prophet today because it needed to be unanimous, and they needed to have the confirmation of God that this is who God chose. Now, yes, we know how it works. We know that this is the seniority, and we know the progression of things. But I love that God is a God of order, and these men know that there is order in God's church. And I love that because they waited until they received the confirmation. And then President Oaks waited till he said after much prayer and much fasting, he was able to choose counselors for the first presidency. There's an order to things, and God will always manifest his will to his people. Okay. So President Eyring, so he said after he said I recognize that it's the Lord's servants and that he leads the church. He thanked the people for sustaining them in their faith, and that he knew that they would sustain him. And then he says this, that they are in this great work of restoration and in final preparation of the Lord's church for his coming. He continues, I bear you my testimony that preparation is occurring, and that President Oaks is the perfect one to do the things that I know the Lord will want done. We can rest assured that God knows what needs to be done, and God is inspiring his prophets, seers, and revelators. We are in final preparations for the Lord's return. There is much to be done. We need to testify boldly. We need to lift each other up. Can we stop the hatred? When someone testifies of Jesus Christ, don't be critical. Don't be critical. We're all trying. We're all learning. But it's the critical, it's the criticism that people are afraid of. People are afraid to testify of Jesus Christ, of his church, of his prophets, of his apostles, because they don't think they can do it. They don't think they have the spiritual gifts needed. They think people will make fun of them. And guess what? They will. People will mock. People will hate. People will make you feel like you're the worst person in the whole world. Trust me. I know. I can be doing things that, like, in the moment I'm like, this feels so good. I know what I'm doing is good. Is it perfect? No. But is it good? Yeah. God works through imperfect people all the time, and he's grateful for them. He's grateful that they're willing to open their mouth and testify. But guess what? People don't open their mouth and testify because they're scared. I get comments all the time. Oh yeah, I wanted to start an Instagram. I wanted to start a YouTube channel. But guess what? I was scared of the criticism. I was scared that people would make fun of me. I was scared of the mean comments I would get. Yep. You should be scared. You should be scared because guess what? People are mean. People are mean. And they might say, oh, I'm not trying to be mean. Yeah, well, you are. Like, you know? And it's good people. It's good people who love the Lord and love Jesus and love the church. And they're still mean because we're still learning. And so my call out to you is be less critical. We don't need to judge people for not being perfect. We don't need to judge President Oaks for whatever we judge him on. This is his first time being a prophet. Okay? Let's give him some grace. Let's, God will judge us. He's a perfect judge. He's all-knowing. He knows our heart. And guess what? You don't know anyone else's heart except your own. You really don't. You can think you know people's heart. You can think that, but you don't. And so let the person who knows everyone's hearts perfectly be the judge. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't judge of what messages to listen to. If something feels off to you, sure, stop listening. Stop listening. You know how many times I've listened to someone and I'm like, that didn't sound right. Do I go and blast them? Do I go and embarrass them in front of all their people who are watching? No, I don't do that. I just stop watching. I have the gift of discernment. So does everyone else. You don't need to blast people. They're brave enough to be doing it. You're sitting behind your screen without a picture and you're like, no. Be a peacemaker. If someone's brave enough to open their mouth and testify, let them. Because guess what? I promise you that your discouraging words, whether it's in good faith or not, is discouraging. It really is. Anyway, all right. I've gone on too long. I obviously have a lot of feelings today. I've recorded a few videos today, and after every time I've done it, I'm like, I probably shouldn't record videos on days that I feel like this. But I think it's needed to say. I think it's needed. I think people need to hear it. People are always like, don't let the mean comments bother you. Well, it does. And it will. But I guess it empowers me to be more bold, to testify better. So, anyway. All right. I love you guys. We'll talk soon. We live in amazing times. I love you all. Bye.